So one more good afternoon. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you for joining us in the middle of the day. I think that this is a presentation of major interest for many at this time of the year, particularly. So welcome to Beyond the Scale, Getting Back on Track, our live Q&A. I want to introduce myself and our presenters, and I'm going to go through a brief slide set to kind of give an introduction to what we're talking about today, and then we'll move ahead to the actual questions and answers. There we go. Okay, so I'm Athea Bediaco with with Work Well NYC as the Eat Well Program Coordinator. And on the line, I also have Darwin Blanc and Brenda Dash, who will be answering your questions.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good to have you.
I'm really happy to be joined with these two pros in all things food related, and also being able to speak to the many questions that I'm sure you all have today. I'll give a quick introduction to Work Well NYC. And many of you may be familiar with Work Well NYC, but for those who are familiar or are not, we are the city's worksite wellness initiative. We have programs, resources, and various offerings to support our city employees to move more, be well, take action with regard to care and prevention, and eat well. And these are the areas that these are the pillars of our work. And specifically today, the topic is about our eating well portion. So we'll be discussing getting back on track beyond the scale with regard to the scale and beyond. So the conversation will include information that will help you build a healthy relationship with food, with your goal setting, getting back on track and staying on track, and also offering some resources that will help along the way. So one important thing that I want to just begin with full consideration of the year that we've come through. And 2020 was hard for very many reasons. We've had to respond to challenges in some really new ways with regard to our physical norms, with the way that we interact with people, with the way that we interact with our home. We have shifted a lot in the ways that we're behaving, whether it's physical environment or just interactivity in general. And that has included going away from norms that we might have had before, and sometimes making new priorities, prioritizing comfort and safety in some new ways, and being forced to create, the new normal, as many people say, or create some new routines. And in some cases, those new routines might be health supporting, and in some, they're things that we might want to revisit at this time. So just a collective way to go for how much you sort of had to go through in the year past. And this is also an opportunity to consider what we're coming from to help to guide where we're going. So, with all seriousness, we just want to say it was a tough time, and we're not completely out of that, but we want to look at what we've been through with some congratulations and be able to say we've done okay, all things considered. And then from that, 2021 does offer a fresh start in a number of ways. And there are we're turning a page, so to speak, even though we're still challenged with some of the same realities. But during this time, it may be a really great opportunity for us to really look in and consider, with all that exists, with all that we're still recovering and restoring from, what's most important now and what we want to do and work on now, and what kinds of things are in our control and are we empowered to take action in. So one of the questions that was posed ahead of time, actually a number of people ask about motivation and staying focused. And I hope that the pieces that are listed here might help support in that area. So creating a bit of a value statement to say what's most important to you and considering what you want to achieve and why. And these are the big propositions that allow us to keep our activity goals, our eating goals, keep any of the goals that are day-to-day goals, moving ahead with them if we begin with a big why. So I really invite folks to be honest with themselves and consider what's most important, given the current realities, what's most important to you and why. And then another really important piece here is how can you move forward with what you want to achieve. So looking at our supports and potentially our barriers is really important as well. So we can consider whether it's physical, environmental supports, like, having sneakers if you want to go for a walk, or social supports like an accountability buddy, or attitude supports like what you're thinking and if that's going to support you or not support you. And then on the opposite, what might not be, thinking about our challenges in advance so that we can do something to help to go beyond those challenges. So if we're looking at our big picture goals, our value statement, what matters to us most, we have to also consider incremental ways that we're going to move ahead to achieve those things. So looking at short-term goals, looking at action-based goals. So we're not just looking at, like, if we use weight loss for an example, that is something that could be considered, but it's something that doesn't have like a clear, actionable begin or end. It's very broad. So considering the ways that we can do something, what's within our control to achieve our bigger aims. And a really important consideration as well is that healthy habits are easier to participate in when we add things that we want to do. We're more likely to stay focused and stick with them. This was another question that was asked in advance, how to stay focused, how to sustain. We can do it better when we're adding things, when we're having an opportunity to eat more fruits and vegetables, to increase our physical activity, as opposed to saying we won't do or we can't do a certain kind of activity or consume a certain kind of food. So these are things to continue to keep in mind as we build goals and as we get back on track with our goals. So I want to introduce something or maybe revisit something that you might have learned before about setting SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym standing for specific, measurable, achievable, timely, and realistic. Realistic and timely, I said it in the wrong order. So these are all areas that these are all words we can use to help define the goals that we're looking to work with. And I'll use weight management as an example. Even if changing a person's weight might not be a value statement goal, that might be something that's possibly more aesthetic or possibly just like an aim, but we might have something bigger that we want to achieve. And then there are behavioral goals that we might have to create to achieve that bigger aim. So a behavioral goal might be something like being more physically active. And we can make it specific, measurable, realistic if we add certain elements. If we want to walk several days a week, and we can even say which days a week we want to do that. And achievable really considers, is it relevant for you? If you're physically able to walk, if you have the tools, if you're able to go outside, that can speak to that part. But if we looked at just lose weight more broadly, that could be measurable, but it doesn't have the other aim specifically. So we definitely want to encourage you to consider all of these letters and make sure that you're working with, incremental, achievable, things that can really be achieved with what you have accessible to you. And again, they can be beyond the scale or related to weight management goals. I wanted to make sure that we offered this equation that is, it's really constant and unchanging as it pertains to weight loss specifically. calories expended would need to be larger than calories consumed for a person to lose weight. So the same thing applies if a person wanted to gain weight, it just goes in the opposite direction. And consider that the expended and consumed are things that are within your control. So expended speaks to physical activity. Consumed speaks to how you're eating and what you're eating. So these are the ways that you can make changes to achieve a change in weight. And then before we shift to responding to some of your questions and bringing on Brenda and Darwin, I just wanted to give a quick introduction about healthy eating and how we're approaching it. So one of the questions that was asked, actually several times people asked about sustaining healthy eating and enjoying healthy eating and also setting an example for children or family members. And I hope that this slide will illustrate what we want to communicate to you. So what you choose definitely matters. The quality of calories really makes a big difference. So the kinds of things that are shown here include diversity. We're not saying that you cannot consume anything. We're trying to use that approach to say, eat more of this as opposed to taking away anything. So that does help to set an example. And it also does say, you're not limited. It doesn't have to be painful. There are a lot of things that are potentially on the table, but we want to lead with certain kinds of foods. So fruits and vegetables definitely take up the largest portion of a healthy eating plan. And that can include a variety of nutrients. That can include, an abundance of vegetable types, different colors and everything. Physical activity is also listed here. So just bringing back that notion of the balance between activity and eating. We want to make sure that you stay active in all kinds of ways, not just going to the gym. It can be doing chores, housework, dancing, taking the stairs, all those kinds of things. Hydration is important. We can drink calories way easier than we can actually eat them. So making sure that you begin with water as your go-to hydration choice. Balancing our diet with lots of whole grains. So these are the grains that are less processed and have all of the fiber and nutrients to help keep you full. Being full and sustained being full was one of the questions that was also asked. And before we transition there, I just wanted to speak on proteins are also necessary, and we want to choose the lean varieties. Protein is another thing that within meals can help to keep you full if you include multiple of these kinds of food groups. So that's a bit of an introduction. I will shift to your questions in just a moment. Participants are muted, so I noticed a lot of people have raised hands, but we would like you to stay muted and instead put questions into the chat feature, and those will be reviewed, and we'll get to those questions as we review them. Many questions were sent in advance, so we're going to also address some of those questions that were sent in advance. And you, of course, can ask for a friend. You can propose the questions, I think, to the panelists as opposed to the whole audience if you'd like to do it that way. So we encourage you to let us know what you're struggling with. Let us know what you want to hear about, and we will get to them, as many as we can. So I'm going to remove the slide set for now and review some of the questions that you put in the chat. And then I will begin with bringing on Darwin and Brenda, and we'll get started with some of your questions. So if we can begin, again, looking at some of the things that were sent in advance, one of the big things that people ask about is sort of what to eat and what not to eat. And again, we want to keep the focus of what you can do as opposed to, the kinds of things you want to take away. So Brenda, I'll pose the first question to you just about, the big food groups that folks should be considering consuming and what it is that they need to remove, if anything, to make sure that they're managing their weight appropriately.
Hello again, everybody. And Afia, I just want to second what you just noted. Really, there's not one specific food item that you want to restrict when we're talking about weight loss, and definitely not entire food groups, which a lot of times we hear of diets where they're avoiding certain food groups. The important thing, however, is to know what foods typically are higher in calories that could potentially cause weight, as well as, and when we talk about foods that are high in calories, we're talking about foods that are high in fats and high in sugars, which means they're excessive in calories. Foods that are high in empty calories, meaning that they have a lot of these energy sources that can cause weight gain or promote weight gain if consumed in excess, but don't provide a lot of vitamins and minerals, such as juices, sweets, baked goods, cakes, cookies. And I'm going to add something to this list that a lot of you may be shocked with, and that's smoothies. But I'm going to do an exclamation point because obviously it depends on how the smoothie is made. If it's made with a lot of fruits, then it is going to be excessive in juice and sweets. And lastly, portions. Portions is a big point here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I just want to start off with a question to everybody, and it's a question I posed to a group of people I was speaking to yesterday. If I had a 700 calorie cookie, and I ate a cookie every day for a month, and that's the only thing I ate, would I lose weight or would I gain weight? Or would I maintain my weight? And the answer would be, more than likely, is that I would lose weight. It's 700 calories. So my follow-up question would be, well, is that a healthy way to lose weight? And is it something that I can do consistently? And more than likely, the answer to that is no. So when we're talking about weight loss and thinking beyond the scale, the focus should be, well, how can we eat a balanced, varied diet while get some of the weight goals that we are looking for? And while we talk about, and Afia had just shared the plate guide, while we talk about a balanced, varied diet, is that it's important for us, for our wellness, to receive vitamins and minerals from foods. And it's important for us to realize that your grains, your vegetables, your dairy products or dairy substitutes, your meat, poultry, fish, or non-animal proteins, as well as fats and oils, are all important because they all provide us different vitamins and minerals. And in order for us to be as healthy as can be while promote weight loss, it's important for our diet to have an adequate amount of those nutrients. So that's it in an excess. I mean, there's nothing more than focusing more so on portions while eating a balanced, varied diet. And that's my answer.
Thank you for that, Brenda. Portions and quality of calories is sort of what a big part of what I heard there. I'll pose the next one to you, Darwin, about Brenda gave the great explanation about eating a 700 calorie cookie and what effects we might have. People ask a lot about snacks and even carbohydrates are a big thing that people wonder about. Can I eat them? How many can I eat? That sort of thing. So we know that we might lose weight if we only ate 700 calories of anything or everything. But we also know that we want to be considerate about quality nutrients. And snacking is inevitable. And carbs probably are too. So Darwin, could you speak a little bit about this question, just about snacks that keep you full and sort of how we manage making sure that we're consuming healthful snacks as well?
That is a great question. So I think when we begin thinking about snacks, one of the reasons why we snack is, to sort of fill in this kind of in between hunger, maybe a hunger you might experience in between meals. So we might snack to keep us, to keep our appetite at ease until we actually are able to reach our next meal. And so while we snack, we really want to make sure we're snacking on healthy options. We don't want to snack on anything that may cause our insulin levels to spike too high. We want to snack on something that is relatively healthy, not relatively healthy, I would just say healthy. And so we want to try snacks that will help keep us full up until our next meal. And so we might want to think about some snacks that might be able to keep us full, that might be able to naturally suppress our appetite. And usually these are snacks that might be full of nutrients, full of fiber, maybe even higher on the protein level. And one of the snacks that come to mind immediately are almonds. So just a handful of almonds, it's a rich source of antioxidants, vitamin E and magnesium, and they're a natural appetite suppressant. And almonds are actually high in protein as well. So using almonds in your salads or just adding it where you may be able to, it can increase feelings of fullness. And it can also help with weight management. Another option for a natural appetite suppressant, which may surprise you, is coffee. So while coffee can leave you feeling jittery and nervous, a moderate amount of coffee can help boost metabolism and act as an appetite suppressant. One of the reasons why is because of the caffeine that's in coffee. And the same goes with tea. I don't know about you, but I don't know if you noticed that, just having some coffee or tea can keep you full. But the thing is, when we typically have coffee or tea, we sometimes are tempted to fill it up with too much sugar or too much cream or too much honey. And by doing that, you amp up the calories tremendously. Coffee has 0 calories. Tea, I believe it also has 0 calories, probably less than 10 calories. And so you really want to opt for just keeping things as natural, in its natural state as much as possible. In a lot of cultures, people use ginger as a natural appetite suppressant, adding it to foods. And also because of its amazing digestive powers, it's great for your digestion and stimulating energy and just improving digestion and making you less hungry. Avocados are a great snack as well. They're full of fiber, they're full of healthy fats, and they also help you suppress appetite when eaten in moderation. And moderation is always key because avocados, since they are full of fat, you will get more calories per gram while eating avocados. And so you do want to be careful with the avocados, but they are one of the best sort of foods that you can use for reaching fullness. And as they say, apples. Me personally, I can always count on an apple. It's filled with soluble fiber and pectin. It just makes you feel full. It helps to regulate your glucose levels and boost your energy levels. And just, the amount of time it takes to chew an apple, it just allows your body to process the food. And so, you're actually able to realize, you've reached fullness before you're running into for the next snack. So those are some of my options. And all of these are also low carb, so they tend to be my go-tos.
Thank you for that, Darwin. There was a lot that was there in that response. And yes, I guess we're pretty low carb, so that was one of the questions that was asked about. We also addressed a few of the different food groups: fruits, healthy oils, proteins in the almonds, and even sort of herbs or natural root. Ginger's a root, but how we can consume things that are natural, low calorie, in some cases, or calories that are going to be fueling our body, in a way that helps us to be physically active, or fueling our body that helps our function, so that we're thinking about nourishment, not just consumption of any regard. There were a number of things that I thought to piggyback and sort of add. And we're also getting a lot of comments in the chat, so I want to figure out how we can speak to many of those different things. Folks asked about recipes, and there were some things that I pulled ahead of time, and I'll drop them in the chat when I get a chance. There was another question about sweets and about eating when you're not hungry. So I just wanted to quickly say the hydration has a big effect too. I know that sometimes we can be thirsty instead of hungry, or just need a distraction. So something like maybe ginger, which lets us chew something that might be helpful with our digestion, or having a cup of no calorie tea, with just tea bag and the herbs, whatever that's in it, with no calories. Or ginger tea, yeah. Those kinds of things might help with our hydration and help give us something to do if we want to chew or sip, as opposed to consuming calories first. And then just addressing the sweets as well. I was thinking of recipes and some of the things that you said. Almonds sometimes come with a little cinnamon or something like that on them. Avocados can be great in smoothies, even though we're not doing just smoothies, but like if you add that, it has a wonderful cream base with a ripe banana or something like that, a little almond butter. Like all of these things can address some of the things that we want, our hunger, our sweet tooth, all of that, but with nutrients, with calorie consciousness, or fruits and vegetables. Mindfulness, yeah, that's another one. So one of the other things, a lot of the other questions that we're getting in advance, and also some of the things that are coming through the chat are about how to manage sort of stress and new ways that we are forced to live our lives in homes a lot. So I want to see if we can speak to some of that a bit. So first, if we could address maybe being at home and being less active at home. So I'll pose this to you, Darwin. Folks have sometimes our lives have changed given that we're in the house more than we used to be before, and there are limitations because we're in the house. And also, even if we do go outside, maybe there's, access to a gym is different, or, we're not able to walk in our community in the same way. And one of the realities is that people are packing on the weight because they're not as physically active, because they can't be, because it's not easy to be. Because employment has shifted, we're taking it away from the field in some cases and forced to be in a smaller environment. So if you could speak a little bit about, Darwin, ways to stay physically active given some of these changes. And I was gonna just add to that, if there are any distinctions for younger people versus older people, like, or even if they're mobility considerations. So sorry, that's a lot in there, but looking at being physically active, in our new environments, and if there are any distinctions for different physical abilities and or ages.
Those are great questions. So the first part of the question that I'm hearing is, how can you manage stress, and some of the effects that stress has on our eating pattern and our weight management goals. So when we think about stress is unavoidable. Stress is 100% guaranteed. And stress is something that can knock you out of your flow, out of your work pattern, your life pattern. And so if you have a goal in mind, I think it's important to realize that there will be factors that not necessarily try to, but there will be factors that can shift you away from that goal. And so it's always important to have a plan. A plan helps you stay on track. And not only is it important to have a plan, it's important to have a backup plan, because you have to plan for, the inevitable. But no matter what, I think it's always important to make it a point to reach your goal. And as Brenda mentioned earlier, she said a key term, mindfulness. So I would say to invite mindfulness into your life, because when you are more mindful, you are more flexible. So you flip your switch from reaction to action, because you're no longer easily triggered by external factors. Something that I like to do personally is I like to set an intention for every day that I begin in the morning, because when you set an intention, it helps to orient you, helps to calibrate you early in your day. And so as you go throughout your day, you're focused on your goal. If there is, a stress factor that appears, in your day, you already have your plan in place. You already know what you're supposed to be doing. You know what your next step is supposed to be. So if a stress factor comes in and you're unable to take that next step, what does the backup plan say? And so I just saw quickly in the chat if you can share an example of an intention. So an intention that I might set in the morning would be to maybe to be, I guess in this scenario, to be more conscious and try to include more vegetables in my diet today. And so that can be the intention I set for the day. Intentions don't have to be some grand thing, but that may be, a small intention that I set for the day. And not only would I have to set the intention, but I would have to just, set these SMART goals that can help me reach that intention. So I think that helps touch on the first part of your question, Nafia, when it comes to stress. What was the second part of the question?
Physical activity and how we can get it in these different times that we're in.
Yeah, so when we think of physical activity, the magic of physical activity doesn't always happen in a fitness facility. Physical activity, gyms are very new. As human beings have evolved, people were very active in the past, but very active in the sense, of herding, of farming, collecting food, migration. But because we're, very stagnant, we're very stagnant in nature today. Gyms are a safe space for us to get physical activity, which can be difficult now because we know how things are. But but movement is key. And I think that's something special about the September challenge that we do every year, because it helps, just to promote and just to encourage people to move more. So I would say to move as much as possible. When you're walking, swing your arms, fidgeting, it burns calories. Fidgeting can seem as, kind of like a sign of anxiety, but, fidgeting, it burns calories. Just moving your shoulders up and down, it helps promote movement. Sometimes when we find ourselves in front of the computer, we tend to slouch. But as soon as you move your shoulders up and down, you start to realize how much mobility and flexibility you weren't achieving before. And so I would encourage stretching, standing, taking nice deep breaths. Deep breaths help burn calories, and it also encourages mindfulness. Calf raises while you're standing on a bus or train. Raising your arms. I think the key is just movement. Movement helps encourage calories being burned.
And I just want to add in there, dancing. I mean, a lot of times exercise can be something that you don't necessarily associate with exercising. Dancing or running after your kids or grandkids around the house, walking your dog or playing with your cat, it's movement and it's causing those muscles to move, and you're burning calories, and it can make you feel good. It makes you feel lighter. You feel, more stretched, more relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to add that in.
Dancing can be very fun. I saw lunges added into the chat as well. But one of the things that I wanted to ask that spoke to both of the questions I posed to you, Darwin, stress and physical activity. And there might be there might be an effect if when we move, when we dance, when we check in on our posture, when we consciously breathe more deeply, and we get mindful of how we are physically, even just when we shake and wiggle a bit, sometimes that can help to relieve stress. It gets something out. So hopefully they can work together. Parking further away, getting off the bus stop earlier, these kinds of things. One last thing I'll add, tech can help. There was a question about tech tools that can be helpful. Somebody mentioned when my watch buzzes, I get up and get off my laptop. So finding, whatever tools we can use to make sure that we stay physically active, that we include that to help support our mental health, and also making sure that we can stay physically active. Before the presentation closes, I'll give more information about our fitness classes too, but that's something that we can do in our homes in many cases. I want to address, coming off of physical activity, and just address something that was put into the chat, and also in advance, people asked about accountability and not being sidetracked. So I saw this in the chat, and I know of something that was asked in advance too, and I'll offer one tip, kind of having an actual person to talk with, to be your accountability buddy. I'll give an example. I wanted to be more physically active. I knew a girlfriend who has similar realities as me, might want to also be the same. And I was like, let's set up a date 7:30 in the morning before we have to begin our work. We'll do a Zoom, whatever. You do what you do, I do what I do, but we're committed to be together during that time, being physically active. So considering ways that we can help other people be supported, help ourselves while, kind of being accountable back to somebody else too, and not be sidetracked. So if you have anything to add in that arena, either of you, please do.
No, I think you covered it. Even groups, if you're able to participate in group settings with co-workers, a lot of times, especially if you're working remotely, you may not have that easy access. So like you said, creating a schedule where you can connect with each other just to see how you're doing, to motivate each other. A lot of times it's just to have that group of cheerleaders who are part of this journey with you, and they act as an additional support system.
Just to add to that, I think the magic of accountability is that, someone else is counting on you, so when you do have a pal, or, you're in that buddy system, someone else is counting on you to be your best self, and by being your best self, you help your buddy be their best selves. So I think it's a beautiful dynamic to partake in.
Mm-hmm. I saw YouTube was also posted as an example of a place that people can be physically active or get tips for physical activity. And I know some of those things can be live too. So that might give a certain accountability if they're like, I don't know, Sheila in New York is way to go or something. If it can serve in that realm. One other question that was lifted up was about eating when not hungry. I think we addressed it a little bit with the stress, but I'll tie back in accountability, and then I'll open to any more responses from you. One of the things that I used to do a while ago as a sort of self-accountability and managing my cravings was like giving myself a must complete this healthy thing before I do the not healthy thing. So like if I have a gallon of water, maybe that I get in the beginning of a week, I want to make sure that gallon of water is consumed before the pack of cookies I got was, or something like that.
Right.
So it's a sort of like personal way to mark things. But folks do eat when they're not hungry. Maybe it's stress, maybe it's boredom, maybe it's just because it's close. My kitchen is just in eyes distance right now where I work every day. So I wonder if there's any other tips and tools about managing, really connecting with hunger and making sure that we're eating the healthful things instead of other things, and not eating just because.
I'll start and then I'll pass it to Darwin. One thing I do want to say, that stress does relate to what we eat. There are studies that actually show that when we're stressed or when we're bored, there may be a change in our hormones, and it increases our appetite, and more so foods that are high in fat and sugar, right? And those are the foods that we want to avoid because there's high in our calories. So what I would say is try to make the environment around you appealing and supportive of your actions. So maybe have fruits or some other healthy food options cut up and available right there for you in the refrigerator, and more so in the front of the refrigerator. And maybe some of the trigger foods that you find are your comfort foods and the foods that you rely on when you're bored or at night after 6 and you're watching TV and you just need to grab something, maybe make them less accessible so they're not the first line of defense that you go to. I do think it's important for you to have foods that you enjoy around you, but you have to know your personality. Like, I'm one of those individuals that's all or nothing. And if there's a trigger food, it's very hard for me to portion it out. So as long as I see it, I'm going to eat it. So for me, it's best not to have them available in the home. But there are other individuals who, if they see that trigger food, they're able to portion it out. I've spoken to people who love chocolate, and they're able to break it up into piece by piece. And if they have that urge, they take that one little piece and they consume it. And that's great because they're able to have that control. So you need to know what your weaknesses are and make the environment comfortable enough for you that is going to support you in your journey.
Anything to add, Darwin?
Yeah, I think, when we think about overeating or stress eating, I like to think of it as a car. If you drive, for example, would you pull into the gas station if your car is on full? Probably not. You'll probably go in with this maybe halfway or even on empty. I think in a lot of these cases, we want to avoid eating when we're on E, because when that happens, we want to try to get that gas tank filled up really quick. And I think another thing to add on to that is, when we do pull into that gas station, we want to pull in for actual gas, things that can get our car moving forward. And so you wouldn't fill your car up with water because it wouldn't help your car move forward. You want to fill it up with things that will help your car drive. And in the same sense, you want to make sure you're eating for nourishment over, anything else. You want to make sure you're eating because your body needs the energy, your body needs the nutrients. It's very difficult to, change some of these habits when we have, it's difficult to change these habits. It's hard to drop a habit. It's easier to replace a habit with another habit. And so if you do find yourself overeating because, maybe you're up late at night, or maybe because you're stressed, maybe try replacing that habit with another positive habit. So if you find yourself overeating as a result of stress or something else, maybe recognize that, take some deep breaths, and that can be a new habit that you can begin to develop. But it does take that first step. Awareness is absolute key. As soon as you've developed awareness, I think there's no turning back. You can only move forward once you develop that awareness. And so once you're able to sort of make those changes, and those changes will take time because a lot of these things, our minds have been doing this for a very long time. And so to undo the things that we've been doing for a long time will take some time, but the more you do it, the more you'll get into a new rhythm. So I will encourage you to, think of some other positive habits that you can begin to implement in replace of some of the less positive habits that you feel you run into.
Thanks for that, Darwin. I want to reconnect with what was presented earlier with sort of like what your big goal is, and that helps to keep you sort of driven so that the things that you're doing are connected back to that big goal. And we have missteps sometimes. That doesn't mean that it's the end of it all. We sort of, it's cyclical, sort of. We learn, we go back, we try again, we see what we did yesterday, see if we want to do something better or different the next day. The mindfulness piece and awareness is great too. Someone used an acronym: hunger, loneliness, tiredness, hunger. I forget what the A was. I didn't capture it, but finding what it is that you're experiencing and responding to that. Someone also asked about not being full no matter what, or satisfying a sweet tooth. Awareness really can speak to these things. So, tuning in, sometimes logging what you're consuming and when and why and how much might be helpful. Just paying attention, like, do I eat chocolate this time of the month? Do I eat chocolate, after I have a conversation with this person? What is it that I'm really hungry for? Maybe it is to be creative, not to eat something. Maybe it's to wiggle a little bit, and that's what you really like, what you're really hungering for. So that awareness can help us to make choices based on that, and they might not be food choices if we tune into sort of what the experience is.
Sometimes it's also taking time. Like, you find that even if you're at the table and you're eating and you're not eating slowly, you eat past that fullness, right? Because it takes a little bit of time for your brain to tell your stomach you're full, or your stomach to tell your brain that you're full. So sometimes if you just allow yourself, again, the mindfulness of enjoying the food or sitting around the table and having conversation, you'll find 5 minutes later, wow, I do feel full, and I didn't realize that a few minutes ago. Another option is use water as your, a low calorie liquid to help you. I mean, water can help you feel full, maybe prior to eating or even while you're eating, to decrease the amount of calories that you're taking in.
Thank you for that addition, Brenda. Some people asked about, I said that I was going to put some recipes in the chat box. I couldn't cut and paste it correctly. So we'll try to send those as a follow-up. And also we will send the recording as a follow-up and the slide sets for people who've been asking. I wonder if we can address 2 more questions, and then we'll start to bring this to a close, and I'll give our upcoming programs and whatnot. So I think I'll address one to each of you. And I'll begin with Brenda. People have asked about some of the things that are trendy, or some might call fads, or things like that, things like intermittent fasting or fasting at all. And let's just speak briefly about some of those things. We haven't talked about that yet in this conversation. No. So tell
me
what
you
have to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we all fast, right? At nighttime, there's a period of time when we go to bed and we're not eating, typically maybe from 10 to 6. So that is intermittent fasting. Now, studies are showing that for some people, it's helpful even if they do it throughout the day. My thing is, one thing I love about food is that it is very individual. We haven't talked about culture, we haven't talked about socialization, we haven't talked about preferences, but to me, when you're talking about food, you can't negate those. Those are the things that make us attracted to food, and also experts. I know we started off and we were talking about Darwin and myself, but to me, every single one of us here are experts, because food is what we've used as an energy source since we've been born. So in terms of different fad diets and how we can successfully get to the end, it truly is dependent upon you. Some people can actually be successful at the intermittent fasting, where they go for periods of time where they don't eat, and then they follow up with a meal, and they don't overconsume in terms of portions. While other people, they can skip a meal and they're so ravenous and so hungry by the time it comes to that following meal, they're eating for 2 because they're doubling up on that follow-up meal. So it depends. I'm not necessarily against it. I just feel that each individual person has to work with what's comfortable with their own boundaries. My biggest concern is that I just feel it's important not to admit. So I don't believe in restrictive diets where I'm not eating any carbohydrates or starches because they're going to cause you to gain weight or they're going to cause my blood sugars to go up. That's not the case, number one. And number two, long term, I wonder about the benefits. So that's my take on the intermittent fasting and some of the fads.
Thank you. I'll say too, one of the things that we were hoping to offer in this session was building a healthy relationship with food. And I like what you talked about, sort of culture, and I like that you begin what I love about food. Let's have all dietitians speak about loving food. Yes, why not? We need it. We need it for nourishment. We use it in celebrations. It's okay to enjoy and connect with food in a healthful way. And connecting with food in a healthful way doesn't mean like we're like I can't do, this is bad. You know, it doesn't include that at all. That's not the kind of example we want to set for others. That's not the way we want to engage with food in a loving and nice affirmative way. And I also heard about you saying ravenous too. So like, you know, we never want to be in a position where it's just like restrictive and I can or I'm going to overindulge because of any restrictions. So thank you for that. We had a question about food access, and I want to also say because we're saying everything's on the table, that means that, you know, if canned fruits and vegetables consider sodium, added sugar and things like that, if that's what you need to consume because that's what's accessible in your community, if you're accessing the food from a home delivery versus a neighborhood store versus a fruit market versus a bodega, all these kinds of things, we're just speaking again with everything being on the table, a variety of nutrients, and, you know, we kind of gave some indication about what those kinds of things might be. And eating. No one ever said don't do that. So I want to go to the opposite, not the opposite, but we talked about food and also physical activity and finding the best balance of those two things. So I'll pose our last question to you, Darwin. One of the things that came in the inbox a lot was about sort of spot training and how we target, you know, belly or this or that. And I think I'll offer with the same notion about fad diets, because there is some deception that might exist in people's mind about this. So I want you to speak on that a little bit and let us know what your thoughts are about sort of how we can direct weight loss in a specific area.
Sure. So, you know, the consensus among most fitness experts and researchers is that spot reduction is in fact a myth. You know, this has been a belief that has evolved from the idea that gaining muscle in one area increases the metabolism in that area, leading to fat reduction in that area. So people think that fat loss in a specific region could be targeted by building muscle in that area. But studies have shown that it actually isn't true. Muscle growth in a region does not reduce fat in that region. Instead, fat is lost from the entire body as a result of diet and regular exercise. And so where your body stores fat is largely determined by genetics, and where your body loses fat first, or where you begin to see fat being lost first, is also determined by genetics. But I do want to encourage you to look for exercises that are functional in body movement, full body exercises that encourage balance and muscle and also in strength, while also trying to achieve cardiovascular activity as well. And so that's what I would encourage people to really look at, because when you just exercise as a whole, you're putting your body in a sort of deficit state, and so your body will begin to want to lose fat. It won't necessarily say, okay, so say for example, I know like the core areas where a lot of people want to lose fat. So if you do abdominal exercises all day, you know, you won't lose, you know, fat in your abdomen, you know, just because you did all these ab exercises. You know, you will have burned calories because you were working hard, you know, and you may, you know, lose fat in other areas, but it's important to just work your full body, because by skipping over the other body parts, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because it can lead to, muscular imbalances. It can lead to, musculoskeletal imbalances. So you really want to focus on targeting the entire body.
Thank you for that, Darwin. What I was thinking too when you were saying that is about, we talked about realistic in the beginning of in the SMART acronym. I would give the analogy about height historically. Like if I wanted to be 4 inches taller at this point in my life, it's not realistic anymore. And that's the same, if my girth is whatever it is, it might not be physiologically possible to remove exactly that in exactly the way that I want to with the kinds of maneuvers that we're talking about, healthful eating and physical activity. So being considerate about what's possible in what timeline. And also again, that big value statement, your bigger goal, many times I think if we look deeply, the things might be broader than an exact waist circumference or clothing size or something like that. So and hopefully when we make changes, especially incremental changes, we can see these little mini victories and help motivate us, and maybe also give new desires. Maybe it isn't just a particular body part that we want changed, but maybe we're more like, I'd like to feel this way, or I'd like to wear this kind of clothes that can be worn even if my belly hasn't completely going away or something like that. So I hope that some of those things might be helpful to consider as well. So I will invite just maybe a 10-second closing statement for you guys, and then we'll go back to the slide set and close down the presentation if we can. So any final thoughts to add, Darwin or Brenda?
Just to focus on, as the title of the webinar, beyond the scale. You just want to look at total wellness, mind, body, soul. Don't focus too much on the scale. Yes, with the adoption of healthy habits, you will eventually see your numbers or your weight goal being met, but also enjoy the journey and the small points throughout that journey, because they're equally as important. I think sometimes we're just an endpoint society where we just focus on the end, but really the meat is in the journey. So it's important for you to celebrate that.
Thank you, Brenda. Darwin?
I would like to add to that statement and just say, while you're, on this journey toward reaching your goal, that, there are many ways to get to your goal, but the idea is to stay motivated. And when you lack motivation, which you will on some days, you will lack motivation, remain disciplined. Discipline is what will get you up and going even when you don't want to. And on those days, and just adding to that, that just helps you with consistency. Consistency is what will help you see results. If you aren't consistent, your body won't know what's going on. You won't know what's going on. But by having, implementing consistent habits as much as possible, you will see results. So enjoy the journey, make those mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and turn those mistakes into lessons, and you will get there.
A quote that I like is, and I'm not sure who the source is, like old folk wisdom, to stumble isn't just to fall or something like that, but to move forward more quickly. So we're gonna revisit. We're gonna have some challenges. We'll revisit them and we'll find new ways to address them. Thank you both. If you would reduce your screens, I'm gonna come back to our slide share and just offer a few more things for us to know as we move ahead. So I mentioned that we would share some resources. So we have this goal setting sheet that is available to you all at this website. And this speaks to the SMART acronym, and you can sort of state out some specific goals here in line with what both Brenda and Darwin said about small goals and revisiting and making them incremental. You can totally use the sheet more than once and set, different goals throughout the year or, throughout the week, however frequency seems appropriate. We also want to just one last mention about all the potential barriers and how we can step ahead even within the challenges. get those accountability buddies, know who's supporting you, know the physical things that might be supporting you, the tech tools, you know, having your sneakers available or the fruit on your counter, tracking your progress. So using these goals and also kind of seeing how you did and how you can revisit those goals and make them different to change for the outcome you want for next time. Celebrating the small wins along the way, because it's incremental, it's continual. It isn't just you achieve whatever it is you want to achieve after one day. It's going to be a process. So allowing that as well. I want to also invite you to what's coming next, and these might be other ways to get questions answered, other ways to engage with programming that's supportive. So we have a partnership with WW, formerly Weight Watchers, to offer a discount for City of New York employees and their family members. So the details are here. There actually is a promotion running right now that will allow you to get some freebies if you join. So the rates are pretty inexpensive, relatively inexpensive, but there's an opportunity right now to also get a free Unstoppable kit, some goodies to help you along the way if you were to join WW. So the details are listed here, and we definitely invite you to participate. In addition, we have some upcoming programming about stress and managing work life. The details are shown. That's next week. I know that mental health and stress management is definitely related to weight management. In addition, we have another healthy eating program about nourishing a healthy heart, a cooking demonstration, also educational session with our partner and also colleague Brenda, who you met today. Our fitness classes, wellness classes, mental health support classes are available 5 days a week, and we invite you to log in here to participate in those and register and get those opportunities for mindfulness, yoga, and the other physical fitness classes. We have a session of Let's Bring the Pressure Down, led by Brenda. And this is a 10-week series about hypertension, avoiding and managing. So please tune in and register to participate in that session. Sometimes there's a connection with weight management and also with our blood pressure numbers are. So this may be of relevance to many. And also our diabetes prevention program, which is being led by Darwin, who also you met today. So there's a cohort beginning in March that's specifically for men. So we invite you to pass on the word or register for that session. And then lastly, just staying in touch with us as we continue to have programming like this, and we would like to support you in the ways that we can. So please do stay in touch so that you can be in the know about upcoming programs and give us your feedback and your questions, and we can continue to build programs that support you on your different needs. So thank you again for your participation. Thank you for joining us today. We will send some of these details as a follow-up to this session, and we'll see you next time. So thanks again all.